The Art of Living 20. Lust, Chastity, and the Freedom to Love. In our modern culture, we are trained to think about love as primarily what others do for us. They give us a rush of emotions, romantic feelings, sexual pleasure, a feeling of not being alone anymore. The greater the feelings, the greater the love must be. But real love is not so self-centered. Real love is not so inward-looking, what you do for me. Authentic love is outward-looking. As St. Thomas Aquinas explains, to love is to will the good of another, to seek what is best for the other person. This has nothing to do with the feelings the other person gives me. Those feelings aren't bad, and they can enrich a relationship, but they are not the essence of love. The danger of relationships that focus on those feelings, especially sexual feelings, is that the ones we love are not really committed to us for who we are. They are committed more to what they get out of us, pleasure, feelings, and emotions. But what happens when the fun times, pleasure, and romantic feelings start to fade? Or if the relationship gets difficult and the other person can get that feeling and pleasure more easily from someone else, will that person still be there for us and stay in the relationship? Deep down, however, we long for a lasting love. We long to be loved for who we are, not as tools for making other people happy and giving them pleasure. We long to be seen, known, valued, and loved, not used. That's why we need the virtue of chastity to moderate our powerful attraction to sexual pleasure, so that we can build relationships of authentic friendship and love and not fall into the culture of use. Unchastity hurts love. The virtue of chastity is not just about avoiding sexual contact outside of marriage. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus made clear that chastity is ultimately a matter of the heart. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Matthew chapter 5, verse 27 to 28. The person who possesses chastity is not a slave to his sexual desires. He does not habitually reduce the people around him to bodies that give him pleasure. He has an interior freedom that makes it easy for him to treat others with the dignity they deserve and love them with the selfless, genuine friendship and love. The chaste person looks at, thinks about, and relates to the people around him with purity of heart. To have chastity of the eyes and purity of heart, however, is very difficult in our highly sexualized world. Almost everywhere we turn, we see people around us dressed immodestly and images on screens that entice us to look lustfully at someone's body. It is a constant battle for those striving for chastity. Still, some might wonder, what's wrong with impure glances, looks, and thoughts? What's the big deal? What's wrong with looking at the opposite sex this way? I'm just appreciating their beauty and enjoying their bodies when I look at them. I'm not hurting anyone. But we are hurting people when we look at them lustfully. We can see this in 4 ways. First, we reduce the person to a mere body, to his physical qualities and good looks, which is to be exploited for our own sexual pleasure. This is far from love. Looking lustfully is using another person. We view the other not as a person, but primarily as a body, a mere object from which we can derive pleasure. St. John Paul II explained that when we give in to sensual glances and looks, we become blind to the person and develop a consumer orientation toward his body. Moreover, we can fall into the lust, and not just when looking at the person in our midst, but also through our memory and imagination. We can make contact even with the body of a person not physically present, experiencing the value of that body to the extent that it constitutes a possible object of enjoyment. Second, each time we give in to lustful looks and glances, we deepen our slavery to sensuality, which makes it harder for us to love people in general. If we look at pornography or allow ourselves to have lustful thoughts or fantasies, we train our will to have no self-control in these matters. So instead of seeing the person in our lives as persons to be loved, we train ourselves to view everyone as an object of potential pleasure. Rather than being able to look at other human persons as friends, as brothers and sisters in Christ, as sons and daughters of God, we habituate ourselves to seeing them primarily as bodies that can give us pleasure. This makes it difficult for us to treat our friends, our colleagues, and others we meet with the dignity they deserve and to love them with purity of heart. Third, we hurt ourselves when we give in to looking lustfully at the opposite sex, for we become enslaved to our sexual desires that always need to be gratified. We will never be at peace. We will always be restless, always crave more sexual pleasure, and sadly be unable to enter fully into friendship with others. Instead, we will find ourselves bouncing around from one pleasurable glance to the next, from one attractive person to the next, from one image on a screen to the next, exhausted and never satisfied. St. John Paul II said this unrestrained sensuality is characteristically fickle, turning wherever it finds that value, wherever a possible object of enjoyment appears. Fourth, not only does lust hurt ourselves and the way we interact with others, but it also hurts our spouses. In marriage, I am called to give my whole heart to my spouse, an undivided heart, a heart that is exclusively for my beloved. If I am looking lustfully at other women, I am unable to give my heart entirely to my spouse. I'm holding part of it back, longing to give it to someone else. That's why Jesus says, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Matthew chapter 5, verse 28. This should be a consideration also for those who hope to be married someday. Now is the time to train your will in chastity of the heart so that you can be free from slavery to impure glances and impure thoughts, and prepare yourself to be able to give your heart entirely to your future spouse. Chastity before marriage. Sex is not just about physical pleasure, nor is it just a form of recreation or amusement. Let's watch a movie. Let's have pizza. Let's have ice cream. Let's have sex. Sex is a profoundly personal act meant to draw man and woman into deeper unity and love. What we do with our bodies expresses our very souls. Hence, the physical union between husband and wife is meant to express a most profound personal union. In giving their bodies to each other, they are giving their very selves to each other. Sex expresses a total self-giving love. This sheds light on why we need to be chaste in our actions outside of marriage. The sexual act itself and the kinds of sexual acts intended to lead up to sex are to be experienced only within the bond of matrimony. That's why, outside of marriage, sex and other physical acts causing arousal are sinful. Couples engaging in those sexual activities outside of marriage are making a lie out of their love. They engage in the physical acts that express a total giving of self, but in reality, they are not committed in any way yet. In a relationship involving premarital sex, the person is not really committed to you. He's just committed to what he gets out of you: fun times, romantic feelings, and sexual pleasure. But if he can get all that from someone else, will he really remain committed to you? Premarital sex basically says, I love you totally, I give myself entirely to you, and I receive you totally until someone better comes along. Chastity in marriage. Married couples also need chastity within their marriage. Some single people might think, I can't wait until I'm married, then I won't have to work so hard at chastity anymore. They are in for a surprise. Married couples need to continue to practice the virtue of chastity, and not only to avoid falling into adultery. They need it to love each other truly in the difficulties and circumstances that come up in ordinary married life. It's not as if married couples are having intimacy every night. There will be times, and maybe even long seasons in marriage, when they may not be able to come together in that way, when one or the other is traveling, when the wife is pregnant and not feeling up for intimacy, in the weeks after having a baby, when one spouse is exhausted or not feeling well, when they fight or there's a period of tension in the marriage, when they discern they need to use natural family planning for a season and it's not a green day, when a spouse is going through a difficult time in life, when the wife has had 4 or 5 kids, is older, and finds herself not as interested in intimacy as often as she used to be. Didn't we just do that last week? Chastity enables the couple to remember that sex is just an expression of marital love. a beautiful expression of love between the spouses, but not the essence of that love. Remember, love is to will the good of the other, to seek what's best for the other person. In Christian marriage, the love between the spouse is a participation in Christ's love for the church. It's a participation in the cross. It is being ever conformed to the sacrificial love of Christ. And sometimes what is best for you or your spouse is to not engage in intimacy on a particular night or series of nights. So no matter how much sensual desire a spouse might have in those periods, he is being invited by Jesus to make a sacrifice and die to those desires for the sake of love. And he will need the virtue of chastity to do that, to help him rise above those sexual desires so he can be free to seek what is best for his beloved and their marriage. The chaste man, therefore, does not pout, become grumpy, or throw a fit when he does not get what he wants sexually from his spouse. The chaste person does not force his spouse to have sex when it is not the best time. He might be disappointed and it might be difficult, but the virtuous man has the self-possession to see this is what is best for his beloved and the marriage in the present moment. Most of all, the virtue of chastity helps ensure that the couple's focuses on the essence of their love, which is their friendship, serving each other, entering into each other's heart, and growing in unity. All that can and should happen even without sexual intimacy. In fact, the physical union between husband and wife is likely to be a much better experience when it is an expression of deep, abiding love that already exists between them, a union of heart to heart. In sum, chastity is not one long no. It is a yes to the person, a yes to God, and a yes to love. It is the virtue that gives us self-control in sexual attraction so that we have self-possession. When we are chaste, we are not slaves to our sexual desires, which lead us to reduce others to bodies. We have the inner strength to rise above those sexual desires and see the persons and treat them with the dignity they deserve. Instead of reducing people to objects for our pleasure, we are able to get to know them, honor them, and take delight in them for who they are, not just for their bodies. It's in this way that chastity gives us the freedom to love. Reflection questions. How do you see the modern, you do something for me, love played out in the world today? How is that different from authentic love, and how is it different from the love Jesus models for us? How does a lack of chastity hurt love? How does it hurt our relationships and hurt other people? Read Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 28. Why is chastity not just a matter of what we do with our bodies, but also a matter of the heart? How can we use people simply in the way we look at them or think about them? In what ways do couples still need chastity even within their marriage? How does it protect their love?